The recently translated tablet of the Ziggurat Tower of Babel shows that the story may be based in reality and not the work of fiction. This Ziggurat Tower of Babel is very similar to the ones that exist today in Iraq, or what used to be known as Ur. This seems like a major correlation and provides evidence of the Saddam Hussein Stargate conspiracy theory. Allegedly, Saddam Hussein was developing Stargate portal technology in Iraq that was inside the Ziggurat. Saddam also had a fascination with King Nebuchadnezzar. The recently translated tablet shows that the Tower of Babel was a Ziggurat and either built or reconstructed by King Nebuchadnezzar. Some scholars say the name Babel means God Gate. Other translations include babili, which means gate of the gods. To me, these are indications that Ur, much like other ancient cities and metallithic structures, was constructed on a vortex ley line. These structures may be facilitating and stabilizing artificial wormholes along with natural earth energies of telluric currents, joining together conductivity discontinuity with specific resonance frequencies, creating a stable magnetic field portal. Much like the recently confirmed actual portals inside the ionosphere discovered by NASA, these seem to be portals present on Earth. The Sumerian universe model, an example including the sacred proportions found in music of the sphere, seems very similar to the galactic model encoded in the Icon that includes all the planets. This could be evidence of an ancient fractal holographic-based unified field of time-space geometry encoded in pyramids all over the world, as is described in the work of Karl Monk, his explanation being the ancients used circles and pi calculating distance and location within the overall harmonic model of Earth, which is also in resonance with Sumerian mathematics and time measurements along with precession of the equinoxes. Bruce Cathy's work further expands upon this with a harmonic grid where ancient sites are placed in perfect alignment along an on-ley line crossing points, creating conductivity discontinuity. Liquid mercury being found beneath the Icon and Olmec pyramid sites tells me that even here in South America, there were portals being generated from the vortex rotation present on ley lines, generating a magnetic field and artificial X-point portal through magnetic reconnection and conductivity discontinuity. The harmful radiation produced by mercury rotation could have been insulated by the mica stone discovered in the Teotihuacan pyramid construction, allowing for safe portal travel. The Book of Enoch describes portals. The angel Uriel explains to Enoch that there are portals around the earth, some bringing storms and weather. This seems to be describing the same electromagnetic interaction between the Earth's ionosphere with the charged particles from the Sun that create an electromagnetic link which influences the weather on Earth as is described in the electric universe theory or plasma cosmology. Are these the same portals that are connections from the Earth to Sun, that magnetic reconnection X points, opening and closing daily? The Tower of Babel, the subject of one of the strangest stories in the Bible, but could it be based on truth? I thought when I was a kid this was folklore or legend, and then a lot of people still think of it in biblical terms as some kind of legend, but they don't really know that it actually existed. Ancient texts have allowed experts to imagine what the building might have looked like, but now astounding new evidence has emerged. Inscribed on the surface of a privately owned tablet is an image that sensationally reveals exactly what the Tower of Babel looked like. This is a very strong piece of evidence that the Tower of Babel story in the Bible was inspired by this real building. This remarkable tablet, which has never been filmed before, dates to the 6th century BC. It was discovered in Babylon over a century ago. Unbelievably, no one realized how important it was until Professor Andrew George, an expert in ancient texts, brought its faint carvings back to life. On the top here, this part, there is a relief depicting a stepped tower, and here a great figure of a human being carrying a staff with a conical hat on. Below that relief is a text which has been chiseled into the monument, and the label is red. It reads Etna and Inki, Ziggurat Babel. And that means the Ziggurat, the war temple tower of the city of Babylon. This tablet provides the first ever image of the real Tower of Babel. It confirms the building was a Mesopotamian stepped tower and illustrates the 7 tiers of the ancient megastructure. Significantly, it also clearly identifies the man behind it, Mesopotamia's most famous ruler, King Nebuchadnezzar II. The building and its builder on the same relief. While the images are extraordinary, the tablet text also reveals a detailed account of the tower's construction. And more importantly, how Nebuchadnezzar went about building it. It reads, from the upper sea, which is the Mediterranean, to the lower sea, that's the Persian Gulf, the far-flung lands and teeming people of the habitations, I mobilized in order to construct this building of the Ziggurat of Babylon. Incredibly, this ancient account is identical to the biblical story of how the Tower of Babel was constructed. For scholars, this tablet offers further proof that the Tower of Babel wasn't just the work of fiction, it was an actual building from antiquity. About 225 miles southeast of Baghdad is an area with historical and religious significance, but the only people who get to see it are American troops. Countries all over the world have took an overwhelming interest in Middle Eastern states. In particular, Iraq has been a place of constant power struggles. Why is that? Some people may be surprised to learn that Iraq was the center of the world for thousands of years. The city of Ur was the very first true city of the world and was central to ancient activity, much like New York City is today. Ur is recorded in written history dating back 6,500 years BC and is even in the Torah, or Old Testament. They make many advanced including math and astronomy to name a few, and they may have even made alien contact. Sounds crazy, but what if it were true? What if we were to tell you that the power struggles in the region surrounding modern-day Iraq is the direct result of the search for ancient technology? What if we were to tell you that a Stargate portal was discovered there in the 1920s and for almost 100 years the search has been on for technology that can change the course of human history? Just wait till you guys hear this. In 2003, in direct response to the attacks in New York City, American and British troops invaded Iraq, and within weeks the two armies crushed the Iraqi armies. Mission complete, right? So why did the United States Army stay for over 10 years after liberating the country? Recently we came across information that strongly suggests that there was a secret objective to the occupation. We are of course referring to the oldest known Stargate on planet Earth that we know of. At the site of the Great Ziggurat, the British explorer discovered something in the 1920s. During the 1980s, Saddam Hussein fortified the ancient complex in an apparent attempt to keep out investigators from seeing what was hidden inside the complex for thousands of years. Strangely, Hussein put an Air Force base at this location and even developed chemical weapons here. He was clearly trying to keep this ancient place heavily guarded. The three huge staircases you see in the images were put here under Saddam Hussein's orders. They were to take huge ancient objects out of the Great Ziggurat, but did he succeed? The theory that we are suggesting is that Saddam Hussein got his hands on super weapons from a forgotten age, which resulted on a preemptive strike from the US and her allies. But why did he not use the technology? Maybe it was undecipherable, maybe it was alien language, maybe cuneiform is in fact an alien language. Imagine this scenario: the US government obtains intelligence that hidden somewhere inside central Iraq is an actual Stargate placed there by the Anunnaki gods of ancient Sumeria, Archaeo-engineering. In this scenario with Nibiru, the hidden planet within our solar system is closest to Earth, the Anunnaki will take the opportunity to travel to Earth through the Stargate and will set up their base in Iraq to share knowledge with people of the region. The idea that the Anunnaki, not gods but extraterrestrials that came and bestowed technology upon the Sumerians, is fascinating. This tech is what made their society so advanced. Could modern Iraq be bracing itself for the same fate against the overwhelming agenda? Essentially, more and more people are coming forward saying they have been involved in these classified programs where these technologies are used quite regularly and that they are found all over the planet. Iraq is just one other place that they are found. The strongest available evidence for a historically presence in Iraq comes from cuneiform tablets directly recording the beliefs and activities of the ancient Sumerians, whose civilizations came almost overnight. Most of these cuneiform tablets relate to stories of the Sumerians interacting with their gods. Most archaeologists initially accepted that these were merely myths and attached little importance to them other than giving insight into the mytho-religious beliefs of the ancient Sumerians. That viewpoint received a major challenge in 1976 when Sumerian scholar Zecharia Sitchin published the first in a series of books on his translations of thousands of Sumerian tablets. Rather than treating the stories of the gods as myths that had little verifiable relevance, Sitchin interpreted the tablets as literal descriptions of events as they occurred in the time. These modern viewpoints are emerging from the ashes of the world that was ruled by empires and dictatorships. Have we simply misinterpreted history for thousands of years? We told you that truth may be stranger than you ever even considered believing. What does that tell you? What do you think of the Stargate portal at the Ziggurat Tower in Iraq? The signs are everywhere. The writing is on the wall. Thanks for watching. The Ziggurat or Great Ziggurat Tower, Sumerian. Ijman ben Archaeo-engineering 1 meaning temple whose foundation creates, or 2 is a Neo-Sumerian Ziggurat in what was the city of Ur near Nazirian, in present-day Ziggurat province, Iraq. The structure was built during the early Bronze Age 21st century BCE, but had crumbled to ruins by the 6th century BCE of the Neo-Babylonian period when it was restored by King Nebuchadnezzar. Its remains were excavated in the 1920s and 1930s by Sir Leonard Woolley. Under Saddam Hussein in the 1980s, they were encased by a partial reconstruction of the facade and the monumental staircase. The Ziggurat Tower is the best preserved of those known from Iran and Iraq. Besides the Ziggurat of Dur-Antash in Build. 3, it is one of 3 well-preserved structures of the Neo-Sumerian city of Ur, along with the royal mausoleum and the palace of Ur and Amedi-Hersag. Babel and Babylon mean gate of God. However, the very root of the name Babel in the Akkadian language, which was a part of the language family spoken in ancient Mesopotamia, particularly by the Assyrians and Babylonians, means gate of God. Here is how one source explains. In Genesis 11:9, the name Babel is etymologized by association with the Hebrew verb babel, to confuse or confound. Babel is regarded as a contraction of earlier Babel. The name Babilu in Akkadian means gate of God, from Bab, gate plus Elu, God. The word Babel can also be seen to mean gate of God, from Bab, gate plus El, God. Thus the Bab part of Babel and Babylon means gate. Key understanding: gate of God and the open door into heaven. The bottom line is that Babel Babylon are said in varying and numerous sources to mean gate of God. The Lord ordained the name of Babel Babylon to mean gate of God because they would represent the counterfeit means of entering through the open door into heaven. Revelation 3:8, with one display of the counterfeit means being revealed in Genesis 11:5, with the building of the city and tower that would reach unto heaven. Earth Energy Grid Global. The Earth Energy Grid is an ancient matrix of lines of subtle forces that form patterns around the globe. Using scalar waves produced by Mother Earth, advanced ancient civilizations built metallithic stone structures along these grid lines and at the intersecting nodal points. Later civilizations built temples, stone circles, medicine wheels, and ceremonial structures on the same sides. These grid lines are also called ley lines. Metallithic Earth Energy Grid. Joseph Farrell frequently speaks about the metallithic grid sites as a global construction project by an ancient elite group in order to preserve the knowledge in stone for later generations. Dr. Farrell uses ancient texts and tribal legends to illustrate that after the cosmic war eons ago, a group of high-technologically advanced giant humans built metallithic sites in 3 stages. The oldest sites are the most complex level of technology with precise orientation to compass directions. Metallithic sites and temples are built where these energy grid lines cross at conductivity/discontinuity points. Newer temples and monuments were often built over far more ancient sites. Bruce L. Cathy wrote in 1997 that the stone monuments in Britain form a gigantic power network and are aligned in a single geometric pattern. Comparing the positions on Ordnance Survey maps of over 3,000 prehistoric stone circles and single standing stones lead to the conclusion that everyone is aligned to neighbors up to 20 miles away at an angle of 23.5 degrees or a multiple of that angle. Dolmens on a Montana dolmen map appear to be lined up on a trajectory at about the same 23-degree angle. Tiwanaku and Pumapunku in Bolivia are examples of the first stage, which is where the most advanced metallurgic precision technology was verified. Stones were heated and then molded. Pyramids in Bosnia and the pyramids in Giza are examples of second stage of metallurgic construction. Metallurgic and Sacred Site Corridor. This section is a presentation of images following the ancient metallurgic and sacred sites that line up along the global energy grid corridor. Many of the sites were built over ancient ruins of much older advanced cultures. These photographs followed the same order as the horizontal grid line, narrative and global maps above in the section with the same title. Easter Island in the South Pacific is famous for the great Moa statues. Caracas in Peru is the site where over 300 elongated skulls were discovered. DNA tests show that they are a new human-like creature, very distant from Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. Enigmatic Nazca lines of Peru are seen only from the air. This single line etching is 165 feet long. Ollantaytambo is an ancient metallurgic site in Peru. Machu Picchu in Peru is one of the most famous sites of ancient ruins in the world. Ancient concentric circular terrace full of moray is located in Cuzco, Peru. Siwat Oasis in Egypt is the site of the ancient temple of the Oracle of Amun where Alexander the Great consulted the Oracle. Pyramids of Giza and the Giza Plateau. Hebron, Jordan is famous for its rock-cut architecture and water conduit system. Ur in Iraq is the birthplace of Abraham and the ancient Ziggurat Tower.
And I have to use mathematics in what I'm doing to try and prove what I'm trying to say. Obviously I'll probably confuse you a little bit at first with it, but as we go over and over, what I'll try to do is to show the sequence of values in mathematics that's the basis of all this thing. And the main thing I've tried to point out is the repetition of the same old values coming up over and over again. And it got to the stage, once I'd established the basis of my work, I could then start applying this to a lot of activity that's going around the world, and which is being accomplished by scientists. And it's obvious now to me that a lot of this information has been in their hands for many, many years. And I've actually checked back on their knowledge to as far back as 1100, which means that this has been around a long time, and it's been around before that. And other evidence even puts it way back before Chinese history, the same mathematics that I'm going to show you today. So there's nothing new. I haven't found anything new whatsoever. I've just started finding out what a small group of people in the world have already known. There's always been this group here. They've never been away from the place. This knowledge has always been known by that group. The only reason it hasn't been used until these days is they didn't have the technology to back it up. But now we've got to the stage where the technology is here and they can start using it. In my books, I've stated that all the evidence pieced together over the many years strongly suggests that modern-day scientists have discovered the secrets of anti-gravity, travel in space-time, which makes possible journeys to the most distant stars, the geometric structure of matter and antimatter, the tapping of energy from the Earth itself at almost no cost, transmutation of the elements, disintegration of matter by use of laser or light beams, and these can be made selective, and almost instant communication between any number of points on the Earth's surface through the Earth itself, a myriad of other technical wonders. All this is possible today. And then I read a book by John Mitchell called The View Over Atlantis, I think it was, and he had a piece in his book that he was talking about something else. It gave me the exact clue I wanted, and it was based on Pythagoras. Now, most of you would have heard of the theorem of Pythagoras, the square and the hypotenuse is sum of the squares on the other two sides. It's a 3, 4, 5 triangle. And in the work I was doing, and the values for the speed of light, the maximum value was 144,000 minutes of arc per second. And I found out again, this is another part of the research, that I could ignore noughts and work harmonically. You could cross those off. And if the noughts this side, you cross those off, and you just use the block number itself. Now, this has been proved and is now accepted. But if you take a halfway, 72, harmonic, and multiply each one of these sides by 72 in proportion, you get 316, 288, and 216. Well, there are 360 degrees in a circle, there are 21,600 minutes in a circle, and 288 is 2c, or twice the speed of light, in harmonics. So I had the proof I wanted. The circle is not an arbitrary figure, it's been cut up to Pythagoras. And the basis is 360, 21,600, and 288, which is twice 144 2c. And the next step was to find out what the actual values I'd found before means and put them into some sort of equation. And this is where the 2c bit come in. Using the values I discovered, I'd worked out the, figured that I'd had to work out the mass of the Earth, and then I realised if I was using the Earth as one unit, I wasn't comparing with anything, I could collate the mass as its volume, and one could be the other. So I used the volume of the Earth and the values 2636 and the speed of light that I'd converted. And I've got a rough round figure of 143,890, or 14389. This is where I started getting into the real mathematics part of it. And I found, see that top lot there? In other words, Earth mass minus the square root of the speed of light reciprocal gave us the speed of light. So you come out the other way, and you could say that m equals c plus the square root of 1 over c. Well, the next step is to put that value of m into Einstein's equation, e equals mc squared, and take the m out and put that bit in. So I ended up with a unified equation, just e equals c plus the square root of 1 over c by c squared. And found that it worked. But I couldn't find anything really until I thought, well, I'd keep sort of doubling the c value and tripling it and see if I started getting answers, and I found that I only had to double it. And that equation, if I fed a particular value of the speed of light into it, which is being used now in electromagnetic transmission, I got the answer was 3928371, which is a reciprocal of that 2545 figure built into the grid system. So it works out perfectly. And then I went further, and I found that when I took the square root of that equation, I was getting the harmonic, which was from the grid pole to the coordinates, the 2695 I'd gotten the first time. But as years have gone by, that's slightly variable. It depends what speed of light value you feed into the equation. And you come from 2694 up to 2695, and just in a slight variation. So now that value is one they use for atomic bombs. I can show you that when I show you how they let the Hiroshima bomb off.
Pythagoras' theorem in Babylonian mathematics. In this article we examine for Babylonian tablets which all have some connection with Pythagoras' theorem. Certainly the Babylonians were familiar with Pythagoras' theorem. The translation of a Babylonian tablet which is preserved in the British Museum goes as follows. 4 is the length and 5 the diagonal. What is the breadth? Its size is not known. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. You take 16 from 25 and there remains 9. What times what shall I take in order to get 9? 3 times 3 is 9. 3 is the breadth. The perimeter of the Great Pyramid's base is indeed 1 to 43,200 of the equatorial circumference of the Earth. And as near as makes no difference, the height of the Great Pyramid above that base is indeed 1 to 43,200 of the polar radius of the Earth. In other words, during all the centuries of darkness experienced by Western civilization when knowledge of our planet's dimensions was lost to us, all we ever needed to do to rediscover the knowledge was to measure the height and base perimeter of the Great Pyramid and multiply by 43,200. The ancients took this time to be a universal constant, and you'll note how this figure works up to the next time level in Sirius, Sothic, cycle of 1,440 years, 360 times 4. If you divide the Earth into a 360-degree circle, and again into 60 minutes of 60 seconds, then the result is 1 second of an arc, or 100 geographical feet. Sacred geography, Ziggurat, Tower of Babel left and Dubai. A physical ziggurat takes on the symbolism of the symbolic ziggurat. These pyramids were symbolic, but their symbolism became extended over time so that the cultures believed that these pyramid temples connected heaven and earth. Because of this, they were not places for public worship, and were accessible only to the priests, in effect the shamans. Given that some may have been placed over geological fault lines or other geological features that aided trance states, they may have been literally that, in effect serving the double purpose, both a place symbolizing a part of heaven, the symbolic dwelling places for the gods, but also the place where it was possible to go into the correct visionary state to go traveling into the spiritual world. The Ziggurat at Babylon, for example, was known as Amenenki, or House of the Platform between heaven and earth. There are 32 ziggurats known at and near Mesopotamia. 28 of them are in Iraq, and 4 of them are in Iran. Notable ziggurats include Ur Ziggurat, the Great Ziggurat of Hor near Nazirian, Iraq, the Ziggurat of Akrikos near Baghdad, Iraq, Chagazindu in Khuzestan, Iran, the most recent to be discovered, Sialk near Kashan, Iran, the White Temple of Uruk, in ancient Sumer, the Marduk Ziggurat, or Amenenki, of ancient Babylon. Mercy Eliade, Shamanism, archaic techniques of ecstasy. The Ziggurat was properly speaking a cosmic mountain, a symbolic image of the cosmos. Its 7 stories represented the 7 planetary heavens as Athor Sipit, or bore the colors of the world as Athor. The temple of Borobudur, a veritable Imago Mundi, was built in the form of a mountain. Artificial mountains are attested in India, and are also found among the Mongols and in Southeast Asia. It seems probable that Mesopotamian influences reached India and the Indian Ocean, although the symbolism of the center mountain tree pillar is an organic part of the most ancient Indian spirituality. Ernest G. McLean, former member of the music department at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York, is the author of the Pythagorean Plato, The Myth of Invariance, and Meditation Through the Koran. Musical Theory and Ancient Cosmology. Ernest G. McLean Piarxis in ancient Mesopotamia, music, mathematics, art, science, religion, and poetic fantasy were fused. Around 3000 BC, the Sumerians simultaneously developed cuneiform writing, in which they recorded their pantheon, and a base 60 number system. Their gods were assigned numbers that encoded the primary ratios of music, with the gods' functions corresponding to their numbers in acoustical theory. Thus the Sumerians created an extensive tonal/arithmetical model for the cosmos. In this far-reaching allegory, the physical world is known by analogy, and the gods give divinity not only to natural forces but also to a supernatural, intuitive understanding of mathematical patterns and psychological forces. The cuneiform mathematical notation, invented by Sumer, was fully exploited by the virtuoso arithmetical calculations of Babylon, politically ascendant in the 2nd millennium. The notation employs few symbols, which are distributed in patterns easily understood by the eye. Thus, few demands are made on memory. In Mesopotamia, mythology took concrete form. For example, important activities of the gods can be read as events in a multiplication table notated as a matrix of Sumerian bricks. Classical Greece abstracted all of the rational tonal concepts embedded in this Sumerian/Babylonian allegory for 2000 years, simply waiting to be demythologized. Moreover, because the religious mythologies of India, China, Babylon, Greece, Israel, and Europe use Sumerian sources and numerology, geology needs to be studied from a musicological perspective. A newly emerging perspective. In the 4th millennium BC, the Sumerians, a non-Semitic people of uncertain origin, developed a high civilization in Mesopotamia, now the southern part of Iraq. For reasons that have been vigorously argued but remain unclear, they developed a base 60 number system, waiting to be recognized within it and in ways obvious to any scribal adept, although invisible to the illiterate, were the main patterns of harmonical theory that appear later in India, Babylon, and Greece. Sumerian tombs of this early period yield the harvest of harps, lyres, and pipes, and the literature surviving on clay tablets abounds in elaborate hymns. In the cuneiform writing of the Sumerians, which was invented concurrently with the base 60 number system, the pantheon of deities is rationalized by assigning to the high gods the base 60 numbers that, as we shall see, encode the primary ratios of music. The glyph, or symbol, for heaven or star, followed by the appropriate number, functions as a god nickname. See Figure 1. The numerical values of the deities are given in Bush 1992. The numbers reveal their significance in triangular arrays of pebble counters. The deification of tone numbers. The deified Sumerian numbers, taken over by Babylon, are 10, 12, 15, 20, 30, 40, and 50, all fractional parts of Father Anu/n equals 60, head of the pantheon. Their fractional values and god names are indicated here with a brief description of their mythological functions. Anu/n, 60, written as a large 1, father of the gods and earliest head of the pantheon, is any reference unit. He is equivalent in our notation to 60 over 60 equals 1, where he functions, according to modern concepts, as geometric mean in the field of rational numbers. Enlil, 55/6 god on a mountain possessing 50 names, is mankind's special guardian and was promoted to head the pantheon circa 2500 BC. Enlil deities in base 60, what the Greeks knew as the human prime number, 5, in their base 10 harmonics. By generating major thirds of 4:5 and minor thirds of 5:6, he saved Sumerians tremendous arithmetical labor, as we shall know in due course. 8/Enki, 42/3 god of the sweet waters and perhaps the busiest deity in Sumer, organizes the earth, including the musical scale. He deities the divine prime number, 3, in the ratio of the musical fifth to 3, the most powerful shaping force in music after the octave. Notice that the trio of highest gods 40, 50, 60 defines the basic musical triad of 4:5:6 do, miles, sol, rising, and miles, do, la, falling. The ratio 4:5 defines a major third and the ratio 5:6 defines a minor third, taken either upward or downward within the matrix of the musical octave. Sin, 31/2 the moon, establishes a basic Sumerian octave matrix as 1:30:60. Shamash, 21/3 the sun, judges the gods. Ishtar, 15/1/4 is the epitome of the feminine, this virgin, wife, and everybody's mistress. Nergal, 12/1/5 is god of the underworld. Bel/Marduk, 10/1/6 the biblical Baal, originally was a minor deity but eventually became head of the Babylonian pantheon in the 2nd millennium BC. He inherited all the powers of the other gods, including Enlil's 50 names, in a giant step toward a Pythagorean monotheism built on the first 10 numbers. The Babylonian universe. The upright central line is the polar axis of the heavens and earth. The two 7-staged pyramids represent the earth, the upper being the abode of living men, the under one the abode of the dead. The separating waters of the 4 seas. The 7 inner homocentric globes are respectively the domains and special abodes of Sin, Shamash, Nabu, Ishtar, Nergal, Marduk, and Ninib, each being a world ruler in his own planetary sphere. The outermost of the spheres, that of Anu and Ea, is the heaven of the fixed stars. The axis from center zenith marks the way of Anu, the axis from center to nadir, the way of Ea. The mathematical code found by Hugh R. Liston Jr. in the dimensions of the Eptiwakon describing the time-space geometric relation seems to be also present in Babylonian cosmology. The Ziggurat and pyramids found all over the world relating time-space geometry also correlates to the ancient musical cosmology music of the spheres. Ancient Prophecy, Encyclopedia of Prophecies of Peoples of the Eastern Hemisphere. The Babylonian Empire existed in the fertile part of the Mesopotamian Valley, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers, now Iraq. As a sacred city of enormous religious influence, Babylon was regarded as the meeting place of heaven and earth, presided over by Bel, god of heaven and earth. The historic city of Babel, Babel, Gate of God, site of the famed Tower of Babel, was rebuilt and expanded under Nebuchadnezzar II between 624 and 518 BC and was renamed Babylon, Babyloni, Gate of the Gods. The northern part of Mesopotamia contained Akkad, the first Semitic empire of the post-flood period. Erosos is reported by Seneca to have learned that around 2300 BC the priesthood of King Sargon of Akkad had compiled a 72-volume astronomical treatise called Illumination of Bel. In this work the astronomer priests had predicted that, when all the planets meet in Capricorn, the world will be destroyed by fire. Such a configuration is considered to occur only once every great year, the precessional cycle of 25,926 years.
The story of human history, evolution, migration, and use of technology is a story that is missing many chapters. We believe we have fashioned a fairly accurate account of where we began, how we migrated across this planet, and at what point in time achieved profound technological advances. But this historical account is also full of questions and illogical pieces of evidence. To this day, we still do not know how ancient Egyptian and Mayan pyramids were built, and on occasion, an archaeological site like Göbekli Tepe, a temple complex built roughly 12,000 years ago in Turkey, leaves us baffled and forces us to reconsider the nature and timeline of our existence. But based on the majority of evidence available, we can surmise that, up until around 6,000 years ago, most humans were primarily hunter-gatherers, nomads that followed favorable climate and food source to stay alive. We do not have written records that predate this time, so we must rely on archaeological evidence and oral history, which for the most part support the hunter-gatherer theory. However, if we focus our attention to a moment roughly 6,000 years ago, in the Sumerian region of Mesopotamia, we realize that something truly profound happened in the course of human events. Almost instantaneously, mankind created the world's first written language, the first wheeled and axled vehicle, the first loom to weave fabric, the first pyramidal structure, and incredibly, a 60-based math system that we still use today. This elegant mathematical system is not only the foundation of geometry, it also provides the mechanics for how we measure the surface of our planet, frequency waves, even the passage of time. It is worth noting here that this Sumerian counting system, based on 12s and 60s, seems like an unlikely and counterintuitive invention. One must assume that, since we have 10 fingers on our hands, humanity's earliest mathematics would have been based on 10, but this is not the case. For some reason, ancient Sumerians were guided to calculate by functions of 12 and 60, and it is this math that gives us 360 degrees to a circle, 60 seconds to a minute, 12 inches to a foot. So how, and more importantly, why was this particular system implemented? We can speculate and come up with numerous theories, or we can consider what the ancient Sumerians themselves wrote about this incredible moment in the advancement of human knowledge. Though it is not what historians want to hear, the Sumerians recorded in clay tablets that they did not invent base 60 mathematics, but were provided this knowledge by beings not of this earth. They describe, in great detail, visitors who, depending on interpretation of the texts, either came from the sky or were the kin of royalty who descended from the heavens. Archaeologists suggest that these are fanciful accounts, but to the Sumerians, these visitors were not mythical gods. They were abnormally tall, human-like beings who lived amongst the people of the day and shared a wealth of knowledge with them. Known as the Anunnaki, this race of giants is reported to have lived with our ancestors for hundreds, possibly thousands of years. Interestingly, in the book of Numbers in the Bible, there is an account of Moses sending scouts ahead to investigate the land of Canaan, which they were about to inhabit. When the men came back, they reported that the giant race of the Anak were still living amongst the people there, and were so big that mere humans looked like grasshoppers in comparison. Were we really contacted by beings not of this world all those years ago? And if so, what was the true purpose of their visit? In an attempt to answer these questions, we must first step into the open field of speculation, then see, based on other evidence that presents itself during our search, if any of this sky visitor theory supports itself in other ways. In essence, what we will be looking for are coincidental clues that, taken in historical context, will either support or renounce the earliest records ever written. In the first sonic geometry video, we were introduced to the notion that Sumerian-based geometry could be represented as audio frequencies, that if you played the sum-angle total of virtually any combination of basic geometric shapes, from the 180s of triangles, to the 540s of pentagons, to the 2160s of cubes, you would get various arrangements of a numerically perfect major chord revealed by a factor 9 grid, which in turn is built upon a tone vibrating at 432 cycles per second. It should be noted that this key tone used to tune instruments has drifted up and down over the centuries, and that 440 cycles is the current international standard. Does this matter? For musical purposes, it could be argued that any tuning system is as good as the next, just so long as every instrument is tuned to the same tone. But since all life can be expressed as energy held together by frequency and vibration, maybe we should be looking deeper at the numerical information revealed by the Factor 9 grid. It is interesting that, when tuning is anything other than 432, the corresponding grid does not produce any intriguing numerical sequences. But when we revert to 432, and if we move up and down strictly by multiples of 9, an astonishing 14-tone matrix of synchronicity begins to appear. For instance, on this unique grid, we find not just some, but all of the numbers representing every primary geometric shape. Looking deeper, we see many other numbers that have played into some of humanity's most profound religious texts. The 72 names of God in the Kabbalah. There is 108, the number of times mantras and mudras have been repeated in Hindu ceremonies. We find 144, a number sequence represented in the Great Pyramid of Giza, the number of days in a Mayan Baktun, or even the 144,000 chosen ones described in the biblical book of Revelation. And of course there is 432 itself, the number mythologist Joseph Campbell encountered so many times in his cultural studies that he called it the most important mythological number in history. Standing back from this Factor 9 matrix, we have to ask ourselves, how could the 432 grid not be important when it reveals so many numeric coincidences? Once again, logic stands in the way of us seeing a bigger picture. Seemingly, because any arbitrary unit of time could be used to measure vibration cycles, none should be considered any more or less correct than the other. We measure sound waves by the Sumerian second, of which there are 86,400 in a day, but we could just as easily have chosen some other span of time. And so what if the Factor 9 grid reveals the numerical value of geometric shapes, the 1440 minutes in a day, the diameters of the moon and sun, and speed of light in miles? If these are all invented arbitrary measurements, a person could logically argue that these coincidental number sequences are nothing more than hand-selected data gathered to support a predetermined theory. And so we must search further. We must look for something completely non-arbitrary, a natural order or pattern of some kind that might serve to bind all this information together. But what might that be? And if it's here on this planet, why haven't we already found it? Maybe perspective has been our problem. What if the answer isn't on this planet, but is the planet itself? After all, the Earth does move in ways that reveal observable patterns. It spins at a rate we call a day, and orbits the sun in a period known as a year. But were you aware of our globe's largest cycle? It is an extremely slow wobble that takes 25,920 years to complete. Known as the precession of the equinox, this unique phenomenon is the largest and slowest movement Earth makes. Much as we do today when we observe celestial objects, does it not stand to reason that an intelligence possessing a distant view of Earth would be aware of its signature wobble? And if this is true, might not it also be possible that this same intelligence would provide us with some kind of device, a mathematical system perhaps, that would not only offer us hints of their existence, but also of their knowledge about our planet? Let's return to the Factor 9 grid. Stepping back to expand our view, we take note of these numbers with a new way of seeing. And now, with a deeper understanding of the precession of the equinox, we begin to compute. Starting with the fundamental 12s and 60s of Sumerian math, we then experiment with the geometric and sacred text number sequences revealed in the 432 matrix. 12 times 2160, 60 times 432, 360 times 72, 180 times 144. The answer to all these equations, 25,920. Like gears turning in a precisely machined clock, we see that every single one of these numbers fits perfectly into 25,920 without remainder. And what we now must realize is that we are no longer talking about an arbitrary math system, but one that can be cross-checked by a completely non-arbitrary thing, the physical wobble of our planet. What's more, we need to keep in mind that this system was implemented long before our ancestors could possibly know what it would reveal, and shared in the only way it could be shared, not by corruptible stories and myths, but in the pure realm of mathematics. In essence, it would seem that we have been catching up to significant information contained in 1260 math, slowly coming to realize that a message of sorts has been making its way across the cosmos into our collective consciousness for thousands of years. And just what is this message? In a word, it is harmony. When we play together as frequencies the numbers of all the primary geometric shapes, what presents itself is a 3-tone, numerically perfect major chord. This phenomenon should not be taken lightly, for what we are seeing is a certain kind of proof that nature, as revealed by mathematical patterns, is a force existing in literal harmony with itself. To further see how harmonics are represented in the workings of creation, consider the Fibonacci sequence, which was first shared with the Western world by Leonardo Fibonacci in 1202. This numerical sequence has been found to represent the spiraling growth pattern of many organic shapes, from seashells to entire galaxies, and so represents one of the most important mathematical algorithms ever discovered. If you are at all familiar with this sequence, you know that it starts from 0, moves forward by 1, then continues by adding the previous 2 digits to arrive at the next in the sequence. So when we take our first two numbers, 0 and 1, and add them together, the sum is still 1. From here, the sequence begins its journey. 1 plus 1 is 2, 2 plus 1 is 3, 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 3 is 8, and so on into infinity. Now, if we were to apply frequencies to this sequence, we would not get audible tones, as single-digit vibrations per second cannot be heard by the human ear. Instead, let's start the Fibonacci series with an audible sound wave. In this case, we will use the numeric value of a simple geometric shape, the triangle. With an angle sum total of 180, this is what a triangle sounds like. Now let's begin again, this time taking note of both the number and tone it represents. We start at 180, and of course 0 plus 180 gives us another 180. Next is 180 plus 180, 360, an octave above the first tone, and also the number representing the sum total of a circle or a square. And here is when things get really interesting. Add 360 to the 180 before it, and you get 540. The sum total of a pentagon, and also a perfect harmonic fifth of our first tone. Then 540 plus 360, and the total is 900. A septagon, and the major third required to build a geometrically perfect major chord once again. Moving one step higher, you get 1440, represented in geometry as a star tetrahedron, or the shape known in ancient Jewish texts as a Merkaba, and which provides another octave of our first tone. Amazingly, when you apply the Fibonacci sequence to vibration cycles, the first 6 digits will always represent a numerically perfect major chord, implying that harmony, in the most literal way possible, is what anchors every Fibonacci series. And once again, we must acknowledge that we are not dealing with an arbitrary, man-made system to reveal these harmonics. Rather, this is yet another example of nature, through number sequences, revealing the harmonic essence of life to mankind. To see how the Fibonacci sequence reveals a spiral, as well as a significant mathematical constant known as the golden ratio, we will need to think spatially. Let's start with a square, but rather than a single square with a volume of 1, we will once again assign a sonic frequency to this shape. In this case, we will choose 144. 0 plus 144 is of course another 144. Then adding these two numbers together, we get 288, or a higher octave of the first tone. Moving on, 144 plus 288 reveals our mysterious 432. Then 288 plus 432 equals 720, or the sum total of a tetrahedron, before arriving at our 6th square and frequency of 1152, a higher octave of the first tone. As you can see, the combined length of any two previous squares informs how big the next square should be, which in turn dictates not only the arc of the unfolding Fibonacci spiral, but also the tones required to build another numerically perfect major chord. Lastly, to arrive at what is known as the golden ratio, which shows up repeatedly in nature, geometry, classic architecture, even the design of the human body, we simply divide one number in the sequence by the number preceding it. And though there are slight variations to be found early in its stages, the golden ratio, carried out to the nearest 100th, is 1.61. This turns out to be a cosmically significant number in our search for coincidence and synchronicity, for watch what happens when we square 1.61, carried out to the nearest 1000th. The answer? 2.592, the same exact number sequence as the precession of the equinox. To further explore the idea that ancient sky visitors were not only aware of Earth's signature wobble, but also the Fibonacci spiral and frequency's relation to geometry, we turn to one of the most famous Sumerian documents ever discovered. In what is known as the King's List, this clay document records the successive and seemingly impossible long reigns of various rulers of the region. Since cuneiform was the first written language, there is no way to cross-reference this list with any other historical document. But in the end, the names may be less important than the number of years the first 3 kings were said to have ruled: 28,800, 36,000, and 43,200 years. Do these numbers look familiar to you? They should, for they are all sequences found on the Factor 9 grid. But what's even more astounding is the fact that, when played together as frequencies, they create the same major chord revealed by the Fibonacci sequence. Finding these perfect harmonic frequencies listed in this ancient document is like finding a computer locked inside King Tut's tomb. Their very existence is irrational, far predating humankind's understanding of vibration and frequency. Are you beginning to see how these Sumerian murals and texts convey a logic-defying awareness of harmonics, geometry, even the mathematics of creation? But what is more astonishing is that these murals appear to hint at a deep knowledge about us as well. Take for instance this image. At first glance, it might appear that this particular being is holding a piece of fruit, or a pine cone. But further investigation reveals something far more intriguing. You see, what he is holding is not a pine cone, but rather the perfect representation of the pineal gland found at the center of the human brain. The only organ in the human body containing this intricate pattern, the pineal gland displays the same swirling Fibonacci growth sequence as a pine cone, and indeed gets its name from the same root word. While we understand certain functions of many areas of the brain, conventional scientists are still confounded by this unique organ. Why does it have similar light receptors to the human eye? What is its true purpose? Though we still have much to learn, it is accepted by many that this gland could very well be what French philosopher and mathematician René Descartes believed it to be, the very seat of the soul, or an organ that, once fully activated, could open a doorway to a deeper understanding of our true nature. As we consider the Fibonacci design of the pineal gland, does it not stand to reason that numerically perfect Fibonacci harmonics could activate this organ? If so, keep in mind that modern musical tuning deprives us of these precise harmonics, and it is likely that, out of billions of people living on this planet today, few have ever heard or felt the effects of these exact frequencies. So far, we've encountered much historical data suggesting that the people of ancient Sumeria were contacted by beings more advanced than the culture of the time. Yet, amazingly, there is even more to consider. Perhaps you are familiar with the image of two snakes climbing upward around a winged staff. This iconic pictograph is often used by hospitals and physicians all over the world to represent the study and practice of human healing. However, what is even more intriguing about this design is that it also instantly conveys the undulating shape of frequency waves, the expanding spiral growth pattern revealed in the Fibonacci sequence, even the double helix design of our DNA. But were you aware that the first time this image, known as a caduceus, ever appeared in history was alongside the same Sumerian murals depicting the Anunnaki sky visitors? How long can we keep calling this self-checking matrix of interlocking information mere coincidence or an assembly of arbitrary measurements? What will it take for us to finally recognize that our understanding of mathematics, harmonics, even biology may have been gifted to us more than arbitrarily created by us? Though it hardly seems possible, there is still more evidence to support the theory that our ancient ancestors received information they could not possibly comprehend at the time, but would one day shed light on the mysterious mechanics of life. To dive into it, we will need to acknowledge two very significant clues left behind nearly 6,000 years ago: the base 60 math system and the shape of the arc as revealed by the caduceus. Combine them, and we are provided with an incredibly powerful tool, an arc of 60 degrees. Many people are familiar with what we now call sacred geometry, a pattern which can be found by drawing a specific formation of overlapping circles, and which has appeared in many sacred sites all over the world. The most elemental expression of sacred geometry is known as the seed of life, which reveals many numeric clues concerning the geometry of nature. The question is, how did we learn how to create this pattern in the first place? Using reverse engineering, it is easy to deconstruct and rebuild with circles, but what is it that would steer us to build this pattern if we had never seen it before? It is the 60-degree arc. With this tool, we no longer need to start with a whole circle and then guess what we should do with it next, because all the information is contained in this one simple shape. Eventually, no matter how or where you begin, when you start with a curved line representing 1/6 of a circle, you will be guided to create what we now know to be sacred geometry. Could this elemental shape be the true Ark of the Covenant? The Ark for which angels were named? The Ark that saved humanity from the wrath of the gods? One does not have to look far to see how this shape has been used to represent the all-knowing essence of creation in many different cultures and religions. Let's take a moment here to demonstrate what this 60-degree arc can do, not only in the realm of two-dimensional geometry, but in 3, even 4-axis geometry as well. It has long been known that when we stay in the realm of straight lines, the triangle is the most elemental flat shape, and the tetrahedron the smallest solid. But is this 4-sided pyramid really the most fundamental geometric solid, meaning it contains edges, faces, and points? The arc says no, for watch what happens when we take a straight line, bow it, duplicate it, then add another arc in the 3rd dimension. Suddenly, we have a much more organic shape, one that resembles a pulse of frequency, a leaf, a seed, or the opening of an eye, a shape that also happens to be the true smallest geometric solid possible, containing only 3 faces and 2 points, compared to a tetrahedron's 4 faces and 4 points. This revolutionary shape, coined a Tryon ray by artist Michael Evans, could very well represent both a quantum jump forward in the study of spatial geometry, while at the same time serving to reconnect us to the moment in our past when humanity made its greatest technological leap in history. As we consider this Tryon ray, with each of its 3 faces locked in arcs of 60 degrees, let's direct our attention to the other significant number in the Sumerian counting system, 12. Watch what happens when we take 12 of these fluid shapes, then radiate them out from 0 point. Of course, there are many directions these 12 vectors could go. How do we know which will keep us on the path of sacred geometry? For that, we simply refer back to the Sumerian 60, this time using it as an angle of deflection to form a structure that, if momentarily frozen in time, would look like this. And here we see something truly unexpected. When we use this same shape to connect the 12 outer points, we find 4 perfect orbits circling a nucleus, revealing the very structure of an atom. Or, if you choose to revert to straight lines to connect the points, you find the most elemental, perfectly balanced geometric solid, a shape Buckminster Fuller called the vector equilibrium, or the very geometry of creation. But rather than stay in this rigid realm of straight lines, let's return to the more organic, curved expression of this structure and notice another piece of intriguing information. When we add together all 36 of its arcs, each containing 60 degrees, the sum is 2160, the same as an astrological age. Then, if we multiply this 2160 by the structure's 12 external points, we arrive once again at 25,920, the master number revealing Earth's signature wobble. This construct, which has been described as the Genesis structure, also happens to give birth to the energetic pattern known as a tube torus, a zero-point energy phenomenon considered by many to be the driving force of creation in the entire universe. Consider the design of an orange, or the dynamic pattern created by Earth's magnetic field, each one revealing the energy pattern of a tube torus. What else? As we follow the expansion of this structure, we see a perfect representation of the first moments of cellular division, or the very beginning of life itself. As expansion continues, the mystery of sacred geometry unfolds in multiple dimensions. Here we see an expanding matrix built with this structure. If we dissect it at a particular point of its growth, we find the exact same seed of life that has been inspiring our species for thousands of years. Amazingly, when we do nothing more than adhere to the 12s and 60s of Sumerian math, the geometric essence of creation is revealed. It is understandably difficult to believe that contact with sky visitors has occurred in our past, but for a moment, allow yourself to consider the idea that the Sumerians were not lying, and that an intelligence of some kind did indeed choose to reach out and share certain knowledge concerning the very nature of our existence. Now stop and ask yourself the following questions. How would this intelligence judge us today? Did we use the information wisely? Did we grasp early enough that nature, whether expressed in the orbital design of an atom or the spiral of an entire galaxy, is an elegant system existing in literal harmony with itself? Or did we lose the connection through pride, ignorance, fear, and doubt, choosing to become the only known dissonant note in the otherwise harmonious design of the universe? Being creatures of free will, we stand at a unique crossroads in our evolutionary story. We can continue a while longer along the path of discord and destruction, or we can retune ourselves to the grand orchestra and participate in the ongoing symphony of creation. The choice is more critical now than any time in history, and you are alive in this moment to affect the outcome. All life, in all its dimensions, is waiting to see what happens from here.
The pyramid parallax, light, electricity, and music of the spheres. Any technology beyond our own would seem like magic to us. Arthur C. Clarke. Recent discoveries emerging from Egypt suggest the existence in prehistory of a worldwide pyramid/sacred temple system, mounted like unto any on key Earth energy meridians, which were used by ancient priest scientists as an electrical system, as a network to produce healing sound frequencies, or even in times of emergency, to stabilize the tectonic plates of the planet by means of harmonics. Modern engineers are familiar with the properties of quartz oscillating frequencies in electronics. Timepieces all rely on quartz crystal, and that the flow of water through limestone, calcium carbonate can replicate the flow of electricity like current from a battery. Image at right, magnetometer reading inside bolite stones, oxon, courtesy on Robbins. The Dragon Project. It is well known that the chalk aquifer of the Wiltshire Basin and neighboring Oxfordshire acts as one of the world's best conductors of electricity, and that metallithic sites like Stonehenge, Canterbury, Rollright and Silbury Hill show detectable rises in electromagnetic radiation within their precincts, when compared with much lower background radiation outside. Quartz inclusions in stone circles allowed them to act as energy storage devices. And over the last 30 years or so, more concentrated in the last 20, we have noticed this unique electromagnetic landscape being used for some other remarkable transmissions through space and time, using a technology which is far beyond anything we have today in common usage. And it's been happening approximately 50 times each summer across southern England, continental Europe, and sporadically in other locations where there is proximity to a sacred ancestral place of ritual/worship, the crop circle phenomenon. Physicists, engineers, and other scientists agree that tellurith energy is a natural consequence of certain combinations of geology and water flow. It seems our ancestors knew this and were much more advanced than we give them credit for, that perhaps we modern souls with access to almost limitless technological resources may have a few lessons to learn in order to catch up. For instance, between 1977 to 83, Dr. John Ruddens and the Dragon Project via London's Institute of Archaeology, with support from the Getty Institute, measured electrical and ultrasound emissions at Allright, Tucson. Ruddens's results, compiled in the hasty publication, Circles of Silence 1985 *, were remarkable. The sun had a clear effect on electromagnetic stimulation and resonance within a circle. John Burke, a biological engineer from Boston University, has measured before and after thunderstorms in Wiltshire, at Silbury, at Tikal in Mexico, and on the Giza Plateau above the Nile, whose annual inundation is legendary. According to him, this aqueous fluctuation process produces a measurable change in the magnetic field. The rising and falling of the Nile at Giza each year produces a constant flowing of water through layers of limestone, which generates an electrical charge, which generates an electric current, which generates a magnetic field. So if you wanted to boost a charge to a monument, it would make sense to have running water nearby. At Tikal, the great stone terraces under the pyramid were constructed to allow water to flow down giant steps into separate streams around the pyramid. Because water flowing in neighboring parallel streams sets up the current, it is likely the Maya used the resulting electrical charge for purposes of ritual celebration. Current thinking in the Archaeo-engineering field suggests that the Nephilim builders were aware of such electromagnetic currents, how the strength or weakness of solar radiation affected them, and that they built their sacred sites to amplify them. Burke believes these structures were placed in areas where unusual geology naturally concentrates electromagnetic energy, that energy is amplified by geological surroundings. Sometimes, where these lines of energy cross, they generate electrical currents in the land. Because we've been taught the ancient Egyptians had only copper tools and simple pulley systems, that their technology was primitive, we're not looking there Giza and pyramid plateaus for higher level technology. The existence of telluric/geomantic energy has long been supported by dowsers and others sensitive to its power. Sometimes known as ley lines, they are seen as bands of energy running between Neolithic sites. Most famous in England is the St. Michael Ley, which runs from Land's End, Cornwall through Glastonbury toward Canterbury/Silbury and ends on the Norfolk/Suffolk County border on the east coast. It was traditionally used as a pilgrim's way for Christian devotion, superimposed on a far older sacred pilgrimage route.
Boszniai nappiramishoz érkező kutatók egyike, Dr. Harry Oldfield, az Egyesült Királyságból érkezett olyan kamerával, amely háromdimenziós filmet tud készíteni az elektromágneses mezőről. Tudjuk, hogy a természetes hegyek felett az elektromágneses mezők vízszintesek és mozdulatlanok. A boszniai nappiramis felvételein az látszik, hogy a piramis belsejében az energia összegyűlik, és percenként távozik a piramis csúcsán át.
The energy got released to the top of the pyramid.
A piramis felett függőleges elektromágneses mezők láthatóak, amelyek jobbra-balra mozognak. Olyan, mintha a piramis élne, mintha szuszogna. Sehol a világon, sem Mexikóban, sem Egyiptomban, sem Kínában nem vizsgálták meg ilyen eszközökkel a piramisokat, így Bosznia nagyon fontos kutatási központtá is kezd válni.
Ez már megközelíti a metafizikát, nem?
Ahhoz, hogy megértsük a piramisokat, a fizikai érzékelés kevés. Azon ősi népcsoportok tagjai, akik ezeket a fizikai struktúrákat felépítették, egyszerre fizikai és spirituális lények voltak, és egyaránt használták a fizikai és a spirituális érzékelést. Képesek voltak megérezni az energiákat. Erre mi már képtelenek vagyunk. Az a mi bajunk, hogy anyagiasokká váltunk. Rábízzuk magunkat a technológiára, kamerákra, kompjúterekre, autókra. Régen az emberek használták a mentális képességeiket és a spirituális tudásukat. Többet tudtak a Föld energiájáról, mint mi. Tudták, hogy a piramisok valamiféle pozitív energiát generálnak, és ők ezt felhasználták. Szóval ahhoz, hogy megértsük a piramisokat, mindkét dimenzióból származó tudásra szükségünk van.
Miért jött
which successfully demonstrates what Nazi technicians were trying to accomplish in the first place, to produce an effective combat aircraft that was not dependent upon vast airfields hopelessly vulnerable to enemy bomber attacks. And war records do indicate the Germans were designing a whole variety of conventionally powered turbojet vertical lift aircraft, including circular discs, for just such purpose. And certain flying saucer prototypes may have actually survived the war. Sighting of a UFO virtually identical to the Nazi flying top was reported by a rancher in Argentina in 1950. Even today, the ultra-high-tech futuristic Venus project features prototype vertical lift hovercraft conceptually identical to the Nazi flying top. But these exotic helicopter prototypes were Luftwaffe, German Air Force projects. The notorious levitating disc designs were said to be absolutely exclusive to and deeply classified within occult Nazi SS operations. Presumably, these super-secret craft employed torsion physics propulsion techniques that remain to this day jealously guarded secrets. Of course, the charming Aldebaran myth implies the mystical secrets of torsion levitation were channeled to the psychic ladies of the Vril Society by extraterrestrial aliens in 1919. But in point of fact, this same torsion technology was explicitly described by the visionary inventor from Croatia, Nikola Tesla, years earlier in 1908. In fact, the application of spinning torsion physics propulsion was also explicitly described centuries earlier in the ancient Sanskrit text Samarangana Sutradhara. The great flying ships called Vimanas levitated by use of a Mercury engine. By means of power latent in the Mercury, which sets the driving whirlwind in motion, a man sitting inside may travel a great distance in the sky. Reference to the driving whirlwind is an obvious reference to torsion physics, a propulsion technology fully understood by lost civilizations thousands of years ago. Nikola Tesla clearly implied that vortex energy could be harnessed for multiple uses depending upon the intensity of the torsion field created. We can clearly see the spectrum of torsion spin effects demonstrated in a child's toy gyroscope, or a destructive tornado, or even a magnificent spiraling galaxy. Tesla fully understood the awesome potentials of torsion physics to allow manipulation of the physical medium of time, space, and gravity. And, as stated by author Nick Cook in his book, The Hunt for Zero Point, manipulate the local gravity field around an object and you could get it to levitate. But far more than mere levitation propulsion, visionary Nikola Tesla foresaw the ultimate power latent in this technology. To cause at will the birth and death of matter would be man's grandest deed, which would make him the master of physical creation, make him fulfill his ultimate destiny. And solid evidence does exist that Nazi physicists were in fact seriously engaged in exploring the potentials of torsion physics, but not exclusively for levitating aircraft propulsion. Mastery of physical creation may well have been the goal of the mysterious Die Glocke or Nazi Bell project. To guarantee extreme secrecy, high-priority Nazi SS research was strictly compartmentalized. So while one division of SS projects may have been exploring the potential of levitation physics for propulsion, a totally separate SS project may have been exploring the weapons potential of Tesla's torsion physics with the Nazi Bell. Within a cylinder device, roughly the size of a camping trailer, tremendous torsion field distortion was generated by counter-rotating mercury plasma. This plasma was then pulsed by extremely high voltage direct current electricity as if to push the very limits of torsion potential, to distort the geometric fabric of time and space itself. But what was the bell's true purpose? At the same time, in late 1944, when the Nazis also succeeded in detonating an atomic bomb in the Baltic, it is also quite likely that they were seeking a vastly more powerful device, a plasma wonder weapon generating far more destructive force than even a hydrogen bomb, capable of destroying not just a city, but perhaps an entire continent, or even a planet. Whatever its use, the Bell project and its designers escaped capture and completely vanished just before the end of the war. Researchers claim the deadly radioactive effects of the mercury plasma used in the Diglaka project made levitating disks unsuited for human pilots. Yet it seems reasonable that less powerful torsion fields could be designed to accommodate pilot safety, or a non-toxic spinning medium might serve just as well. Austrian forest warden, naturalist, philosopher, and inventor Victor Schauberger, whose observations revealed the vortex as nature's most efficient means for the transmission of energy, demonstrated a powerful 10-foot diameter vortex propulsion machine at a facility in Vienna that generated diamagnetic levitation, with results so spectacular that it shot straight through the 24-foot high hangar ceiling. Schauberger's repulsine engine was powered only with water. Exactly how much of Schauberger's research was actually used by the Reich is unclear, but by the end of the war, as a prized captive of the American forces, he was deported to the United States, where authorities claimed rights to all his ideas, thoughts, and discoveries, past as well as future. His torsion research to this day remains classified.
To this pulse. And we'll begin with simply the concentric patterns in the water as the frequency begins. Every once in a while, we'll reach a key threshold resonance, such as that moment right there. And in that key threshold resonance, the entire pattern morphed into a more complex expression of itself, simply because the frequency happens. As we reach another key threshold resonance, this entire pattern will morph into a beautifully and more complex pattern of itself, again and again. And look at this pattern right here. Look what you're seeing right here. Look at the beautiful geometry. Here is a perfect cube. There's a perfect tetrahedron, a star tetrahedron. In 2 dimensions, we've got the octahedron. Very powerful images of sacred geometry held in place simply because we've achieved the vibratory pattern that allows that in this water droplet.
Dr. Jenny, in Volume 2 of Cymatics wrote, "Now it is beyond a doubt that where organization is concerned, the harmonic figures of physics are in fact essentially similar to the harmonic patterns found in organic nature. In the first place, we have certain experiences that harmonic systems such as we have visualized in our experiments arise from oscillations in the form of intervals and harmonic frequencies. That is indisputable. If biological rhythms operate as generative factors at the interval-like frequencies appropriate to them, then harmonic patterns then must be necessarily forthcoming. According to Dr. Jenny, harmonics and harmonious patterns are interrelated. The intervals created by the frequencies and their harmonics were responsible for giving shape to the different substances with which drives Jenny experimented. If a film of liquid is irradiated by sound, patterns of the kind shown in figures 165 to 170 can be revealed by the Schlieren method. A complicated lattice appears comprising squares, diagonals and perpendiculars. Curves, circles and radiating patterns result. But here again, number, proportion and symmetry prevail. In the experiments shown here, oil of turpentine was the substance used. Such harmonic patterns can be produced in films of many different liquids by means of vibration. The orderliness prevails down to the smallest corner, e.g. in figures 169 and 170, which reproduce details. Cymatic effects of this kind are also produced at the microscopic level and can be clearly recognized even after the original has been magnified several hundred times. We realize that these figures and processes appear in every dimension. These same X-point portals that occurred in the ionosphere from magnetic reconnection must occur on Earth where ley lines cross, creating conductivity discontinuity. The occurrence on land that generates this energies in conjunction with geometry of metallithic structures must be facilitating portal stabilization, which is what the Tower of Babel might have been used for.
Hidden magnetic portals around Earth. Presented by Science at NASA. A favorite theme of science fiction is the portal, an extraordinary opening in space or time that connects travelers to distant realms. A good portal is a shortcut, a guide, a door into the unknown, if only they actually existed. It turns out that they do, sort of, and a NASA-funded researcher at the University of Iowa has figured out how to find them. We call them X-points, or electron diffusion regions, explains plasma physicist Jack Scudder of the University of Iowa. They're places where the magnetic field of Earth connects to the magnetic field of the Sun, creating an uninterrupted path leading from our own planet to the Sun's atmosphere 93 million miles away. Observations by NASA's Themis spacecraft and Europe's cluster probes suggest that these magnetic portals open and close dozens of times each day. They're typically located a few tens of thousands of kilometers from Earth, where the geomagnetic field meets the onrushing solar wind. Most portals are small and short-lived. Others are yawning, vast, and sustained. Energetic particles can flow through the openings, heating Earth's upper atmosphere, sparking geomagnetic storms, and igniting bright polar auroras. NASA is planning a mission called MMS, short for Magnetospheric Multiscale Mission, due to launch in 2014 to study the phenomenon. Bristling with energetic particle detectors and magnetic sensors, the 4 spacecraft of MMS will spread out in Earth's magnetosphere and surround the portals to observe how they work. Just one problem: finding them. Magnetic portals are invisible, unstable, and elusive. They open and close without warning, and there are no signposts to guide us in, notes Scudder. Actually, there are signposts, and Scudder has found them. Portals form via the process of magnetic reconnection. Mingling lines of magnetic force from the Sun and Earth crisscross and join to create the openings. X-points are where the crisscross takes place. The sudden joining of magnetic fields can propel jets of charged particles from the X-point, creating an electron diffusion region. To learn how to pinpoint these events, Scudder looked at data from a space probe that orbited Earth more than 10 years ago. In the late 1990s, NASA's Polar spacecraft spent years in Earth's magnetosphere, explains Scudder, and it encountered many X-points during its mission. Because Polar carried sensors similar to those of MMS, Scudder decided to see how an X-point looked to Polar. Using Polar data, we have found 5 simple combinations of magnetic field and energetic particle measurements that tell us when we've come across an X-point or an electron diffusion region. A single spacecraft, properly instrumented, can make these measurements. This means that a single member of the MMS constellation, using the diagnostics, can find a portal and alert other members of the constellation. Mission planners long thought that MMS might have to spend a year or so learning to find portals before it could study them. Scudder's work shortcuts the process, allowing MMS to get to work without delay. It's a shortcut worthy of the best portals of fiction. Only this time, the portals are real. And with the new signposts, we know how to find them. For a portal to more NASA science news, visit science.nasa.gov.
Researchers find liquid mercury under the pyramid of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan. Large quantities of mercury found under ruins of ancient Teotihuacan. Mexican archaeologist Sergio Gomez and his team have discovered liquid mercury at the end of the tunnel below the Pyramid of the Feathered Serpent, the third largest pyramid in Teotihuacan. Researchers have discovered liquid mercury in a tunnel underneath the pyramid at Teotihuacan, Mexico, a finding that could indicate that sealed chambers beneath the monument contain the tomb of an ancient king. Mexican researcher Sergio Gomez and his team announced the finding on Friday, according to The Guardian, noting that they had uncovered large quantities of liquid mercury under the pyramid. A toxic metal, mercury had no readily apparent uses for the ancient civilizations that constructed Mesoamerican pyramids, but it has been found at 3 other excavations, Chimaya and one Olmec, in the past. Teotihuacan and mica. What is mica? A powerful radioactive insulator doing in structures that date back thousands of years. One of the biggest mysteries surrounding the history of Teotihuacan is surely the huge presence of mica found in the pyramids of this great ancient city. In 1906, a worker digging at the site made one of the most important and mysterious discoveries that would forever change how we looked at Teotihuacan. On the 5th deck of the Pyramid of the Sun, the worker discovered a thick layer of laminated mica covering the huge area. It was an odd place for the material to be found. At that time, in 1906, mica was invaluable in the market. It was used for the construction of capacitors and was considered an incredibly well-appreciated electrical and thermal insulator which had a melting point over 1100 degrees Celsius. For some obscure reason, the architects of Teotihuacan placed it there in the 2nd century BC, at the time of the greatest expansion of their civilization. The question was why. Liquid mercury being found beneath Teotihuacan and Olmec pyramid sites tells me that even here in South America, there were portals being generated from the vortex rotation present on ley lines generating a magnetic field and artificial X-point portals through magnetic reconnection and conductivity discontinuity. The harmful radiation produced by mercury rotation could have been insulated by the mica stone, allowing for safe portal travel. The Book of Enoch describes portals. The angel Uriel explains to Enoch that there are portals around the earth, some bringing storms and weather. This seems to be describing the same electromagnetic interaction between the Earth's ionosphere with the charged particles from the Sun that create an electromagnetic link which influences the weather on Earth as it's described in the electric universe theory of plasma cosmology. Are these the same portals that are connection from the Earth to Sun that magnetic connection X points, opening and closing daily?
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe, brought to you by the Thunderbolts Project at thunderbolts.info. In the previous Space News, physicist Wal Thornhill discussed the recent report that giant filamentary networks pervade the Milky Way galaxy, and these filaments are, quote, closely linked to the formation of stars. We now turn our attention to our own celestial neighborhood and the electrical connection between the Earth and the Sun. It was more than a century ago that the Norwegian experimentalist Christian Birkeland proposed that charged particles from the Sun were the cause of Earth's auroras. For decades, the astronomical mainstream, including the renowned mathematician Sidney Chapman, dismissed and ridiculed Birkeland's hypothesis. Decades after his death, Birkeland's thesis was proven correct. Yet even today, the significance of this confirmation has yet to fully register. Against a mountain of new evidence, most discussion of the Earth-Sun connection still assumes that the Sun and the Earth are neutral bodies in space. Yet all that we have learned in the space age, and confirmed through ever finer data, defies this assumption. Electric currents flowing through the conductive medium of plasma represent the electrical circuitry between the Earth and the Sun. This circuitry is routinely evidenced in science reports today. From the 2007 discovery of so-called magnetic ropes connecting the Earth and the Sun and driving Earth's auroras. The 2014 discovery, completely unexpected by mainstream scientists, that intense solar activity causes increased lightning on Earth. Proton storms from coronal mass ejections that sometimes reach the Earth in a matter of minutes. And today, a new confirmation of the electrical relationship between our planet and our star. An Australian undergraduate student is now being credited with having proven the existence of so-called plasma ducts, or oddly shaped tubular plasma structures above the Earth. The student, Cleo Loy, says of these structures, "We measured their position to be about 600 kilometers above the ground in the upper ionosphere, and they appear to be continuing upwards into the plasmasphere. This is around where the neutral atmosphere ends, and we are transitioning to the plasma of outer space. We found that the ionization patterns in the ionosphere are quite structured. They flow in these tubular structures that are aligned with the Earth's magnetic field, and they can move of their own accord. Wal Thornhill discusses the significance of this discovery for the electric universe theory.
The second report concerns the Earth and the discovery of electrons riding huge plasma ducts above the Earth. The work, supported by the Centre for All-Sky Astrophysics, sought to confirm 60-year-old theories about these structures. Reading the original 1953 paper titled An Investigation of Whistling Atmospherics, we find they are thought to be due to waves which originate in normal impulsive atmospherics from lightning and travel through the outer ionosphere following the lines of force of the Earth's magnetic field and crossing over the equator at a great height. During their journey they become dispersed so as to arrive as whistlers. Measurements of the degree of dispersion of the whistlers have been interpreted to yield information about the density of electrons in the atmosphere at very great heights. The paper concludes, and I quote, "On the whole, the evidence supports the view that the ionization through which the whistlers travel is of extraterrestrial origin. It must be admitted, however, that the electron densities required at great heights are uncomfortably large." End of quote. This conclusion accords with the electric universe model of an electrical connection between the Earth and the Sun's circuit. It is expected, therefore, that electrical activity in the Earth's atmosphere, like lightning, and higher in the ionosphere, is influenced by solar activity. Notably, the ionization has been found to transition to the plasma of outer space. Below the ionosphere, the conducting path for this external electrical power includes the upward lightning flashes called sprites, and cloud-to-ground lightning below the clouds. This supports the controversial discovery in 2001 by Professor Edgar Bering, a physicist at the University of Houston in Texas, who said, "The charge that produces sprites is not below in the cloud, it's in the mesosphere itself." In July 1993, I said at a conference in Cambridge, England, "The principal difficulty in understanding the origin of lightning is likely to be the assumption that the Earth is a closed electrical system with no input from the solar plasma environment via the magnetosphere." This new report seems to verify part of that circuit. However, once again, the report defers any real understanding by referring to these magnetic field-aligned Birkeland current cylinders simply as unexplained plasma ducts.
For continuous updates on space news from the electric universe, stay tuned to thunderbolts.info.
Enoch, 790 BCE, Chapter 11. 10. From there I went on towards the extremities of the earth, where I saw large beasts different from each other, and birds various in their countenances and forms, as well as with notes of different sounds. 11. To the east of these beasts I perceived the extremities of the earth, where heaven ceased. 12. The gates of heaven stood open, and I beheld the celestial stars come forth. 13. I numbered them as they proceeded out of the gate, and wrote them all down, as they came out one by one according to their number. 14. I wrote down their names altogether, their times and their seasons, as the angel Uriel, who was with me, pointed them out to me. 15. He showed them all to me, and wrote down an account of them. 16. He also wrote down for me their names, their regulations, and their operations. 17. From there I advanced on towards the north, to the extremities of the earth. 18. And there I saw a great and glorious wonder at the extremities of the whole earth. 19. I saw their heavenly gates opening into heaven, 3 of them distinctly separated. The northern winds proceeded from them, blowing cold, hail, frost, snow, dew, and rain. 20. From one of the gates they blew mildly, but when they blew from the 2 other gates, it was with violence and force. They blew over the earth strongly. 21. From there I went to the extremities of the world westwards. 22. Where I perceived 3 gates open, as I had seen in the north, the gates and passages through them being of equal magnitude. 23. Then I proceeded to the extremities of the earth southwards, where I saw 3 gates open to the south, from which issued dew, rain, and wine. 24. From there I went to the extremities of heaven eastwards, where I saw 3 heavenly gates open to the east, which had smaller gates within them. 25. Through each of these small gates the stars of heaven passed on, and proceeded towards the west by path which was seen by them, and that at every period of their appearance. 26. When I beheld them, I blessed, every time in which they appeared, I blessed the Lord of glory, who had made those great and splendid signs, that they might display the magnificence of this works to angels and to the souls of men. 27. And that these might glorify all his works and operations, might see the effect of his power, might glorify the great labor of his hands. 28. And bless him forever and ever.